Hello, boys and girls of all ages. Welcome to our summer reading program. Imagine your story. This is the first reading that we're going to have, and today our story is entitled The Three Bears by Joseph Jacobs. Here we go. Listen carefully and read along. Once upon a time, there were three bears who lived together in a house in a wood. One of them was a small wee bear, one was a middle-sized bear, and the last was a great, huge bear. They each had a pot for their porridge, a small pot for the small wee bear, a middle-sized pot for the middle-sized bear, and a huge pot for the great, huge bear. And they each had a chair to sit in, a small chair for the small wee bear, a middle-sized chair for the middle-sized bear, and a great huge chair for the great huge bear. And they each had a bed to sleep in, a small bed for the small wee bear, a middle-sized one for the middle-sized bear, and a great huge bed for the great huge bear. One day, after they made their breakfast porridge and poured it into their porridge pots, they went for a walk in the wood, leaving the porridge to cool so they wouldn't burn their mouths by eating it too soon. While they were out walking, a little girl came into the clearing where their house was. She could not have been a good little girl because she peeped into the window and then peered through the keyhole to see if anyone was home. And seeing nobody in the house, she lifted the latch and went in. Inside the house, the little girl saw the porridge pots on the table. If she had been a good little girl, she would have waited until the bears came home, and then perhaps they would have asked her to have breakfast with them. But she was a naughty little girl, so she set about helping herself. First, she tasted the porridge of the great, huge bear, but it was too hot for her, and she said a bad word about that. Then she tasted the porridge of the middle-sized bear, and that was too cold for her, and she said a bad word about that too. Then she found the porridge of the small wee bear and tasted that. It was neither too hot nor too cold, but just right. And she liked it so much she ate it all up. But the naughty little girl even said a bad word about that little pot because it didn't hold enough porridge for her. She sat down in the chair of the great, huge bear, but that was too hard for her. Next, she sat down in the chair of the middle-sized bear, but that was too soft for her. And then she sat down in the chair of the small wee bear, and that was neither too hard nor too soft, but just right. So she sat and sat until the bottom fell out, and down she went, bump, onto the floor. And the little girl said a bad word about that too. Then the little girl went upstairs and into the bedroom where the three bears slept. First, she lay down on the bed of the huge, great bear, but the pillow was too high. Next, she lay down on the bed of the middle-sized bear, but the pillow was too flat. Then she lay down on the bed of the small wee bear, and the pillow was neither too high nor too flat, but just right. So she covered herself up and was so comfortable that she fell fast asleep. By this time, the three bears thought their porridge would be cool enough to eat, so they went home for breakfast. Now the little girl had left the spoon of the great huge bear standing in his porridge.
"Somebody has been eating my porridge,"
said the great huge bear in a great rough, gruff voice. And when the middle-sized bear looked at his porridge, he saw that the spoon was standing in it too. "Someone has been eating my porridge," said the middle-sized bear in his middle voice. Then the small wee bear looked at his, and the spoon was in the porridge pot, but the porridge was all gone. "Someone has been eating my porridge and has eaten it all up," said the small wee bear in his small wee voice. The three bears, seeing that someone had come into their house and eaten up the small wee bear's breakfast, began to look for whoever it was. Now the little girl had not put the hard cushion straight when she got up from the chair of the great huge bear.
"Someone has been sitting in my chair," said the great huge bear in his great rough, gruff voice.
And the little girl had pressed down the soft cushion of the middle-sized bear. "Someone has been sitting in my chair," said the middle-sized bear in his middle voice. And you know what the little girl had done to the third chair? "Someone has been sitting in my chair and has sat the bottom out of it," said the small wee bear in his small wee voice. Then the three bears thought that they had better look upstairs, so they went up to their bedroom. Now the little girl had pulled the pillow of the great huge bear off the bed.
"Somebody has been lying in my bed," said the great huge bear in his great rough, gruff voice. And the little girl had left the pillow of the middle-sized bear at the foot of the bed. "Someone has been lying in my bed," said the middle-sized bear in his middle voice. And when the small wee bear looked at his bed, the pillow was in its right place, but on the pillow was the head of the little girl, which was not in the right place, for she should not have been there at all. "Someone's been lying in my bed, and here she is," said the small wee bear in his small wee voice. Even though she was fast asleep, the little girl had heard the great, rough, gruff voice of the great, huge bear as if in a dream. And she had heard the middle voice of the middle-sized bear, but she still didn't wake up. But when she heard the small wee voice of the small wee bear, it was so sharp and shrill and close that it woke her up at once. Up she started, and when she saw the three bears looking at her from one side of the bed, she tumbled out of the other side and ran to the window, which was open. Out jumped the little girl, and whether she hurt herself when she hit the ground or found her way home through the wood or was punished for staying away from school that day, no one knows. But she was never seen by the three bears again. Boys and girls, we hope you've enjoyed our story today about Goldilocks and the Three Bears. We have several other books with fairy tales at our Cottageville Library. You can look at some of the books that we have available. These are just a few. We have a story about dragons. We have a story about Hansel and Gretel. Puss in Boots is a funny one. We have Rapunzel. And we have our very own book about Goldilocks and the Three Bears available. Yes, indeed. You can order books by calling our library here in Cottageville, or you can order them online at www.colletonlibrary.org. And we hope that you will be making orders to come by and pick up those books when they have come in. And we have curbside service. And we will meet you out in our parking lot and give you all kinds of fun books to read. We look forward to seeing you, and we look forward to hearing from you. Don't forget, read, read, read.